Welcome to Let's Talk Security, where we spotlight cybersecurity companies and give an inside look at the people and technology behind the latest advancements in the industry. We discuss a wide range of topics with subject matter experts about today's cybersecurity challenges and how their solutions are helping organizations like yours maintain a continuous security posture. Please welcome the host of Let's Talk Security, Jeff Wolach.
Today on Let's Talk Security, I will be speaking with the company Palo Alto Networks. I'm here with Jim Hooker, Regional Sales Manager. Thank you for joining me today, Jim.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it. It's always exciting to join Sinnott Wolach, and I'm so excited today just to talk about some of the cool things that we're doing at Palo.
Great. We're excited to talk to you. Hey, Jim, I got a list of questions I put together for our chat today, so why don't we just jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tell us a little bit about Palo Alto Networks and your role as the Regional Sales Manager.
Yeah, so I am a regional sales manager, otherwise known as sales guy. That's the technical term I like to roll with. I cover South Florida. So I roam around with an engineer, Chip Tobias, and we cover higher ed, counties, local government. The vertical space that I'm in is abbreviated SLED often. And inside of Palo Alto Networks, we're seeing just tremendous growth. State, local, and education is exploding even during this time, right, during COVID. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that people have to work differently. And some of that is that, we're moving to this remote access scenario, but also it's the scaling of that remote access, because many things work, but they don't work whenever you try to scale them. And the other thing is that there's a SOHO, a small office, home office security experience that I think we took for granted. We are now learning that it is very, very important to map that experience to the same experience that we expect on-prem, especially when you're in a situation like we are now with a pandemic that really kind of has an indeterminate end. And so a great example is in my K-12 customers where SIPA compliance is critical. And many of these students have laptops or Chromebooks or whatever that they've brought home, kind of an extension of their classroom. And there's still a responsibility for compliance around that. So security has kind of taken on a new face. And I think we've realized that the ownership of security extends well beyond the walls.
No, absolutely. And give us a little bit of history then about Palo Alto Networks. I mean, they haven't been around that long if you kind of think about it, but they are, the industry leader right now.
Yeah, it hasn't even been 2 decades, right? That Nirzo came up with this great idea. He said, hey, why are we engineering these layer 3, layer 4 firewalls when that's not the way we consume information, right? Information is consumed at the top layer at applications. So how do we then protect applications when we're talking about port and protocol? And so his idea was what we now know is the next gen firewall. That didn't exist, simply was not a thing in the world. And so whenever he took the idea to market, it literally defined the Gartner quadrant for NGFW. Now, look, I know you've said the word technical probably at least once so far. Just so you know, I think I had a lobotomy about a year or so ago when I was an engineer, no longer an engineer, right? So I'm kind of doing my best to keep up on the technical side, but I will tell you this, Palo is facing the same technical challenges that the rest of the OEMs in the security industry are. We always give the example that if you walk across the floor of RSA, there's 1,000 different companies, and you could walk across next year and you wouldn't recognize the logos. And we've seen a lot of consolidation. And the difference, I think, for Palo and what's kind of defined Palo within the security world is the fact that we've stood the test of time and we've been able to subsume across the product set that was commonly used in the industry. It's very difficult to build a firewall in the first place. But we've been very, very successful at not only building this firewall, but maintaining a firewall that has evolved through the years and with all of the different needs that have come into play over the past, I would say the past 2 decades. And I attribute that, and I mentioned this to you earlier today, is really around two thoughts. The first one is native innovation. And this isn't something you're going to find on our website, but it's just my perception inside of Palo Alto Networks looking out. And I've been in IT now for about 26 years.
Wow. Okay.
Native innovation being the first one and platform thinking being the second one. And it's the marrying of those two concepts. Just to kind of build on that for a second, if you think about how we came out to market, we looked at not just a way to address applications, but also how could we take other boxes, other solutions that customers had deployed in their environment that they were collecting insights from. How do we take those things and sort of marry them for all the benefits of correlation and simplification of operations? We did it with URL filtering. We did it with the IPS concept, which really is what defined the next gen piece. All these ideas now, they're table stakes. You wouldn't come to market with without a next gen firewall, and you wouldn't come to market with one that didn't have URL filtering built into it, right? That's just understood. But we pioneered that. So that native sort of innovation is very, very important. When it's all built together, it works well together. The insights are shared between them, and it makes the job of SecOps exponentially easier. It's a 1 + 1 = 3 sort of math. And it's been proven again and again. And we continue to face new challenges in security that enable us to prove that sort of approach, the platform approach, and kind of natively engineered and innovative simply makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And it does make sense. I mean, think about it. I equate the Palo Alto firewall kind of to a building, right? You walk into a building, ground floor, you hit the security guard. They're going to ask you some questions, maybe want to look at your driver's license and then say, okay, where are you going? Well, I'm going upstairs to the 4th floor. Okay, great. Go up to the 4th floor. And then what do? I run into a receptionist, ask me very similar questions. So I'm going through a series of parallel processes, if you will, to make sure that I am good to go and get into see who I need to see. So that's kind of how I look at the firewall, and the next gen firewall is being able to look at all of that information in a kind of a manner that makes sense, right? Sequential manner, and say, hey, okay, you get past here, you get past there, now you're able to go in. And you know what, Jim, you could never get away from the sales engineer side, man. I remember you. I remember when you first started and you were the sales engineer, and now you've crossed over to the dark side, man. So, but you never lose that technical, experience and mindset. So, I kudos to you. Hey, again, congratulations to Palo Alto Networks for really just tearing up the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Recently being a leader in the WAN Edge Infrastructure Magic Quadrant with the Cloud Genix acquisition. That was awesome. And then last year being named, leader in the enterprise firewall space for the 8th straight time. Can you share a little bit about, the new next generation SD-WAN solution and what makes it unique now in the market?
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe nothing examples my last answer better than the fact that we continue to innovate, and SD-WAN is an example of that. We're not resting on our laurels, right? With the fact that we have been right in the Gartner top right now for 8 years running. Or even if you look at NSS Labs, we continue to stand at the top with our performance tests. One of the things we pride ourselves on, if you ever do go out there and take a gander at our spec sheets, is that we give you one number. You can turn on everything on the firewall, and you know that you're going to operate worst case at the number we tell you. And I think that really sets us apart from the competition. Now, your question about SD-WAN, that's important. That was a recent announcement. We did acquire a company, to be fair, named CloudGenix. It was back in April, I believe, that we closed that purchase. But don't think of this as a bolt-on to our product set. And I know that there's lots of, again, kind of aggregation in the security space. We see it with larger companies swallowing up lots and lots of, I'll call it feature-driven purchases. This is not really what happened here. And you can see this exampled in the way the announcement came out about the next gen SD-WAN. So if that rings a bell, right? Remember, we came out with the next gen firewall. So here we are again. What are we doing in the SD-WAN space that would really constitute next gen? There's two innovations. The first one is the instantiation of machine learning so that the health of a WAN connection can be determined from all of the symptoms. And maybe to say it another way, the health of the application. So instead of getting alerts about latency being high and the app is inaccessible and the port isn't responding, we simply notify the user that the root cause is the primary path VPN link is down. So yeah, all of those other things have been suppressed. And that's innovation, right? That's where we didn't simply bolt this on. But even more importantly, and that, really better examples this is the platform side. Because remember, again, it's about innovation, native innovation, as I like to call it, and platform approach. So with regard to platform and SD-WAN, we've now integrated the SD-WAN solution into Prisma Access. I know Prisma Access isn't something that I've mentioned yet here in the conversation, but Prisma Access is a part of our platform that delivers firewall as a service from the cloud, like all the as a service products. So firewall from the cloud. It's all the firewall, but with none of the hardware, you might say. Still managed centrally from Panorama. Now that's important. Deployment is through Panorama. Configuration is through Panorama. All the management centrally still through Panorama. You save, commit, just like you do with all your hardware firewalls, or your mix of hardware and firewall in the cloud, all from the same commit. Now, how does this marry back into the SD-WAN conversation? Because the backbone access, right, or the backbone of the Prisma Access is a tier 1 fiber optic transit network from GCP, Google's cloud, and AWS, Amazon's cloud. So our presence inside of those clouds that we've built this Prisma Access solution in there provides us a tier 1 transit. So when you onboard all of your sites and they're all connected into the Prisma Access firewall in the cloud, you're running across a tier 1. And so the question might be, so what, right? What does that do for us? Well, here's what it does. It offers you something that's never been seen in the industry before. Mid-mile SLAs. You got to repeat it, right? Mid-mile SLAs. Everyone thinks of last mile. I remember moving from MPLS. I worked at Citrix at the time, and I was trying to convince everyone, hey, we could probably move the internet and save some money. And we tried a few circuits, and it was a disaster. Performance was horrible because we were guaranteed the last mile. And even then, when I made those moves, that was in late 90s, the performance simply wasn't up to par. Well, fast forward, as you got into the late 2000s, we started seeing 4 nines approaching 5 nines with our internet circuits, but we still never had anything beyond the last mile, which means if you've got 2 sites and you connect them both to the internet, and then you say, oh, let's do a VPN between them, or let's do SD-WAN between them, and path our traffic between them. All you can do is choose between your paths. But if both of your paths are not that good once they get past your last mile, your SD-WAN is simply a choice of 2 bad options. So how do you fix the mid-mile? You do it with big fiber, and you do it with tier 1 providers. And that's what we're doing. So to say it another way, imagine a world of SD-WAN that doesn't have the stress of only guaranteeing last mile performance. People that are still on MPLS, or maybe the ones that are still on ATM, I hope not. Anyone that's trying to move to just a full direct internet access type WAN, and they want to use SD-WAN, they're still needing to be worried about that. That's a significant part of the journey. Understanding that there's tons of AS paths that get selected between the 2 last hops. Not only do we guarantee it, but we guarantee it in writing. We actually post a health page of that mid-mile path Prisma Access for Networks is what we imagined to answer this. And it's available right now. It's integrated with the traditional SD-WAN architecture, but being a part of the Prisma network means that not only the sites that have the traditional SD-WAN boxes, but also every site that's been onboarded to our firewall in the cloud all have the same SD-WAN mid-mile, fantastic performance solution.
Yeah, no, that's important, especially, I have companies and customers that, they have 2 circuits usually. And one of those circuits is just sitting there, not being used, just waiting for something catastrophic to happen to the first circuit. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's a waste of money. And that's what I believe SD-WAN also helps organizations do, is it allows them to use both circuits, and makes a good choice of which path to take for what type of traffic. And with Palo Alto, I know with the next generation CloudGenix SD-WAN product, it's a little bit different because, again, being a Palo Alto product, it's based around applications. Mm-hmm. So you're allowed to now, tell the SD-WAN solution what applications to actually pass over certain links, which is very important. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yep.
And just like other companies today, Jim, things have shifted obviously this year, work from home. So we're looking at, security shifting from the traditional inside out to more of the outside in or outside outside. So I know you talked a little bit about Prisma Access, but if you want to kind of elaborate on what Palo Alto has been doing for their customers, to address these work from home issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at the risk of sounding repetitive, Prisma Access, but this time for users. So Prisma Access, as a product offering from Palo, actually has 2 flavors. One is called Prisma Access for Networks, and that's the one that we just talked about. But the other side is Prisma Access for Users. And what this provides is what any other remote access solution would provide. Basically, laptops, smart devices, whatever you need to connect remotely with. It's a cloud-based solution, just as the Prisma Access for Networks is. And because of that, it dynamically scales, right, to cloud scale on demand. So if your number of users dramatically increases one day or dramatically reduces, we can accommodate that. And you don't have to worry about a VPN hub being in a certain geography because the architecture provides us with over 130 points of presence all across the globe. So geography is no barrier. And this is that as many users as connect and onboard at any moment, because typically if you look at, for example, back to a K-12 customer, I have literally sometimes 4,000 or 5,000 students onboarding immediately at the same time. When I say onboarding, VPNing making that connection. And when they do, that's a very, very heavy load for a firewall to handle, or for any VPN concentration device to handle, because all of that is IPsec, it's all cryptography. We do that at cloud scale. And so there's never a threshold that you have to be concerned about. It's engineering today for the future.
No, and you're right. I mean, think about it. People, when they shifted from, again, being on-prem to now from home, the VPN capacity just took a huge hit because people, you're trying to VPN across a static link. If you think about it, oh, I got a 1 gig connection coming in, or I got a 10 gig connection, but I have thousands now of users that went from being inside to outside. So the way Prisma Access is architected is ingenious, because pretty much it's dynamic bandwidth per se, and it's taking the load off of your firewall or VPN concentrator, and then leveraging the links and the backhauls, if you will, to data you just need, rather than having to push everything out through the same connection people are coming in from. So it
ties right back into that SD-WAN environment that you may have your remote offices all connected up into. So as a result, those users, when they access those applications, they may be accessing an application that's going through a cloud-based firewall that your data center is connected to. And in that case, they're going to benefit from that next gen SD-WAN experience as well. So it goes back to the platform concept. As you build these things and they work together well, then the cohesiveness and the experience is felt throughout the platform.
No, absolutely. Jim, many people still think of Palo Alto as just a firewall company. Okay, I remember we're in our 12th year, believe it or not, of working with Palo Alto. Sinnott Wolach's been around 14 years, so 12 of those 14 we've been working with Palo Alto. I remember back in 2008 when we first were talking to Palo Alto about becoming a partner, and then talking to our customers. They're like, who? What? Palo Alto Networks? What is that company? Never heard of them. Oh, wait, you want me to forklift upgrade a legacy firewall I've been using forever for a company I know nothing about? And now they're basically a household name in cybersecurity, data security. It's amazing. It's amazing just how fast, the growth of Palo Alto has become. So why don't you take us a little bit through some of the other areas that Palo Alto has as far as solutions, rather than just the next generation firewall. Palo Alto, I know last year alone, made a lot of acquisitions. I think it was several billions of dollars worth of acquisitions and technologies that basically round out what they're doing as a security company. So if you can talk to us about that, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, that's a pretty big bite to chew. So I'm going to have a drink here with my Let's Talk Security.
Go for it.
And then I will go down this path, because the platform, I think I mentioned that word a couple of times, has become very, very expansive. To start where we started, we annexed from the traditional hardware-based firewall into the cloud, as we just discussed, but not even in the same way, because the first sort of step away from hardware-based firewalls was with our VM series. And we have VM series that run inside of GCP and AWS and Azure, and even inside of the Oracle Cloud. But we've done that even a step farther. We're now working with containers, and that's called the CN series. As if that's not enough, some companies on the cutting edge are using serverless functions. And so we're securing those serverless functions, the same kind of security that you would expect if you were operating in a CN series, a container series environment. All of these things around our firewalls are all folded into the Strata product set. And there's three. So Strata is one. The second one is Prisma. It sits right beside it. And the third one is Cortex. But Prisma, we've talked a little bit about already, the Prisma Access products. In fact, Prisma Access for networks really kind of straddles, and Prisma Access for users really kind of straddles that Strata Prisma product set, because it's cloud delivered, and that's what the Prisma product solution set is all about. But at the same time, it's providing a service that's very firewall traditional. In fact, if I didn't mention this before, when you do get a Prisma firewall in the sky, it looks exactly like a firewall that you would operate with on your network. Exact same PAN-OS, again, managed centrally from Panorama. So there's a lot of sort of symbiosis between these products. But the Prisma brand goes on, and it has other products within it. For example, Prisma Cloud is the protection of IaaS infrastructure and data that's stored in IaaS. Some of that is regulatory, some of that could be malware, some of it is simple corporate compliance. You can set your compliance metrics, and we can monitor those assets in the cloud, and we can report on those. SaaS, Prisma SaaS is another solution in the Prisma set. More and more people are consuming applications from the cloud. I remember, I was just talking to someone about this the other day, is Web 2.0. That almost sounds silly these days. But I remember when that was sort of a turning point and everyone was trying to figure out how do you consume all the same stuff that was in the thick application set, but through your browser. How do you do that? Now that's just a part of the way we live. So as that stuff is all now living through a web browser over HTTP, how do you really inspect it and secure it? Prisma Access is how you do that. That's a cloud access security broker type solution, often, again, summarized as a CASB. It's API based, so it's not actually inline. So there's no threat or risk of a device running a proxy service or something like that going down. It's definitely on the innovative side, and it's worth taking a look at. But alongside Strata and alongside Prisma is the third one that I mentioned, and that's Cortex. In this part of the platform, we have our Cortex endpoint. We call it XDR. Now, many people have heard of EDR, right? Endpoint detection response. But the reason why we put an X in there is because it wasn't good enough to simply detect things on the endpoint and make a determination. But we realized that a lot of the threats or the data that was related to those threats had already passed through a firewall or had already been seen in some other way on the network, but maybe in a less direct manner. For example, something behavioral. So going back to the name, Cortex XDR, the endpoint solution, what is it really doing? Well, first off, it's doing EDR. Secondly, it's doing endpoint protection, often termed EPP. Ours is 0 day, so there's no signatures required. The third thing it's doing is the behavioral, which is often phrased as UEBA, user and endpoint behavioral analytics. And then the last is where we kind of detect and incorporate things that the firewall has seen, and that's often termed NTA, Network Threat Analytics. Now, the NTA that we consume for the endpoint to be smarter is not just sourced from Palo firewalls, but we can source it from third parties. In fact, if you've got, for example, a Cisco ASA or Firepower, we can source the log data from that and then interpret that in the context of, is the risk seen on the client correlated by network-based data? Finally, in the Cortex suite, we've got Cortex Xor. Now, there's that X again. You might be familiar with the acronym SOAR, which is Security, Orchestration, and Response, but Xor is about the ability to deliver the same sort of intelligence and do it in the way we do it with our platform, and to do it across the entire portfolio. So we're consuming not only insights from all of the third-party tie-ins that a SOAR platform typically can, but we can also build custom ones. But we do that natively within our own portfolio. So when you stand up XOR in your environment, you will immediately be able to garner insights and make automated decisions with your firewall's intelligence as well as your endpoint's intelligence. So at the end of the day, to sum it all up, there's 3 big buckets of our platform, but they all truly do work together. They're all API interrelated, and they're all providing sort of a dashboard and automation that can be gained through the Cortex Xor solution.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. I was on actually this morning a short webinar about the Cortex Xor product, and I believe they said there's over 450 integration points with products today out there that they can automate certain things to, when an alert or something triggers, they just start doing the automation, and it saves so much time and research and everything else that organizations have to do. And you're right. I mean, the rounding of the whole security infrastructure, Palo Alto, I believe, has really done a great job pioneering that. I know they several years ago, they founded the Security Threat Alliance, which basically, brings together companies like Check Point, Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, to be able to, share that information that all of them are collecting, and that used to be very proprietary to each other. But like you said, being able to bring into the Cortex data lake information from other firewalls like Cisco and Checkpoint, and then utilize that data to make decisions around, what's going on within the threat landscape there. So that's awesome. 10.0, PanOS 10.0 just came out. I mean, I've been a beta tester. You're gonna laugh, but I tell people all the time, guess what PanOS I actually started on 12 years ago, and people will say, 4.0, 5. No,
I was going to go 4.
Let's go 2.0. Okay.
Wow.
that's I'm telling you, that's how long it's been. So 2.0, next generation firewall. We're now at 10.0. 10.0 introduces a lot of cool new stuff, enhancements on decryption, obviously Sd-Wan, global protect, 5G capabilities, container. But the big update, I think that is pretty exciting, especially when, you see this in writing. The world's first machine learning powered next generation firewall. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when you said it that way, I kind of expected like a light to shine down and like or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's the funny thing is that when this was announced, I saw a lot of people that I call peers in the organization who are engineers, although again, I'm not the engineer anymore. But they really doubted it. They weren't sure. They needed to see it. So they ended up having a roadshow internally where I don't know what they were calling these meetings, but I'll tell you what I was calling them proof in the pudding meetings. They literally were having these like 10-minute prezos, and the rest of the hour was nothing but SEs going, but wait, how does it, but how can it, because people were doubtful and they were, probably right to be skeptical. We've got this amazing firewall, right? That, back to your comment you just made, right? About this, the consortium of Checkpoint and other firewall vendors who do see all the same things, right? We all share the data. So for us to come out with something completely unique, sort of the whole next gen pioneering idea, this late in the firewall game is pretty astounding. But I'll tell you what I know about it, right? So obviously there's some secret sauce behind the scenes, as there is with all cool technology, especially when it first comes out. But I think the way I would frame this up initially is this, that we are in a war against machines. Now, you may not believe that until you struggle to get like your toaster working, or like I bought a new microwave and the first thing it wanted to do was connect to the internet. In fact, it wouldn't even let me cook something until I connect to the internet. So there was sort of this machine first sort of age that we're getting into. Now, I'm not sure that it's Terminator or Skynet. I'll call it Skynet Light, right? But there are two things that are very, very true when it comes to the security fight. Okay, that attackers have two critical advantages. The first one is the speed of proliferation, and that is due to hackers and attackers using compute scale in the cloud and automation techniques. And the automation techniques are largely software-based. We found whole black markets that were uncovered where they're distributing for free, oftentimes, ways to automate the attacks. The second one, besides the speed of proliferation, is polymorphism. And I know that's a big word. It's the idea that you can take a basic attack and you can vary it so that it can get past a protection that's already in place. A great example is that you can, from a DOS command, you can pipe a random string of text into a file, and you can change that file. Now, if it's a malware executable, it literally changes the malware executable. However, the only effect is that the hash changes, it still has the same threat power. It still manipulates the way it manipulated before. So with polymorphism being something that they can do at a very, very fast rate due to speed of proliferation, you're essentially fighting a battle that you can't win when you're fighting it with these. It's just impossible.
Right.
We also know this fact: hackers only have to be right one time, right? It's the weakest link idea. So what do? Do we try to fight Skynet with our bare hands? Well, I mean, we see this. Patient zero gets hit in your organization. You reach out, you need to get a new signature. The manufacturer of your firewall creates a signature and has to disseminate it. Somewhat manual. And then you may need to create a new policy. So you get a human to sit down. There's nothing machine sourced about that example. It's just slow. So what is the answer? Well, the answer is the world's first ML-powered next-gen firewall. So what is it? All right, so what is it exactly? So this is what we told the world. We said it's a firewall that can execute protections instantaneously, inline. But let me tell you what we told the SEs. We can do it through the use of supervised machine learning. Now, yeah, we were the first next-gen firewall to send hashes down from a cloud-based sandbox. We call it Wildfire. We also, learn from the firewalls, and the signatures are then built for the next threat. But we've taken the cloud intelligence that we like to call the first step, which is static analysis by Wildfire. We've been able to determine that there is only about 100,000 or so what we called feature vectors. They're the characteristics of attacks that we needed to model. So we call these models, and we take these models and send them down to the firewall. Now, on the technical behind the scenes, we don't do it inside of the content updates. We do it with an open stream via TCP connection to the firewall. We send these models down into the firewall, and they develop a sort of skeleton key for matching against malware. What does it mean to a customer? Customer is still going, sounds cool, don't think we're at Skynet yet, but what does it do for me? Well, here's what it does. It protects you from 95% of unknown, right? Underline, highlight, not the known. The known we get, unknown malicious files. So some of our competitors will store and forward. In other words, they store and they determine whether it's malicious. That may take 5, may take 15 minutes, who knows? Some of our competitors don't. They do what we used to do, which is we just forward it on, and then we try to get a verdict and then send down and update everyone and hope that the endpoint protection protects you. Those are really your only two options until now. Now we're able to take that bucket of unknown and peel away 95% and determine that quickly using these models that have over 100,000 feature vectors all built into them. And you say, this sounds crazy, no one can do that. Well, we sort of figured that out with our endpoint a long time ago. Now, before it was called XDR, it was called traps.
Right.
And that was what was so cool, because the traps that were set were around the behaviors of malware. So we didn't need signatures on our endpoint either. We're just doing it on the firewall, not just for malware, but also for URLs. And then interestingly, for phishing. A great example on phishing, and I thought of this today, is that it eliminates the need for crawlers by a firewall manufacturer like ourselves that might be sent out by the Wildfire cloud, for example, to pre-classify content to determine if a website is bad or if it's trying to do phishing. Well, the problem with crawlers is that the bad guys know what crawlers are. They classify the IPs. Crawler IP lists can be made available on the dark web. How do you get around that? You just don't use them. Well, we don't need them anymore. We don't need them because there are no crawlers. It's when Jeff Wolach surfs the web from his own workstation, from his own IP address. As long as our firewall is in between him and the internet, we're going to be able to detect immediately using these models whether or not that site is malicious or not. So they can't avoid us anymore. They can't detect our crawlers. So what else comes out of this? Or, besides, okay, cool, instantaneous protections are awesome. But is that it? Is there more to it? I mean, you said machine learning. Yeah, there actually is more to it. In fact, one of the other things that developed after we worked out these models was that we could actually determine good and bad behaviors for devices that we didn't have a way to detect before. Kind of like that user and endpoint behavioral analytics that we're doing for the Cortex solution, we're able to now detect if IoT devices that are often not well understood and have no physical interface or no logical interface you can connect to, we can determine whether or not their behaviors are acceptable or not by looking at the data, the session data, the good and bad. And so as a result, when you're in the PanOS 10.0 interface, which is what's required for the ML powered, you will actually have IoT recommendations listed for you there. So it's just really cool. I mean, there's probably lots more we could talk about on this, but Jeff, what do you think? I mean, have you ever heard of anything like this before? This to me is just mind-blowing.
No, not at all. I mean, this Palo Alto has been an innovator since day one. You know, next generation firewall, people thought, oh, it's just a bunch of bolt-on things. And it's not. It was built from the ground up. So is everything else they've been basically doing. Even though they've made some acquisitions, they've made the smart acquisitions. They've taken the product and made it so that it is, integrated very, very nicely into the existing architecture, not just, oh, okay, hey, we bought, XYZ company and we're just going to sell that as XYZ like other manufacturers do and not really bring it in. And then you have a whole nother interface, a whole nother GUI, whatever. I mean, I remember 12 years ago when I saw the GUI of the first firewall from Palo Alto, I'm like, I'm on board, man. Where do I sign? Where do I sign? It was very innovative back then. It is something that you get used to, you get familiar with, and then you look at something else and you say, why doesn't it look like Palo Alto? It's amazing. And I'm really excited that you joined us today to kind of share with us some of the new things and the exciting things that Palo Alto is pioneering and doing out there in the industry. Again, not to mention some of the other features like the enhanced decryption, the 5G capability, which is right around the corner, yes. And that's going to change our world. So it's amazing, all the things out there that's going on with, Palo Alto solutions. So
yeah, it's truly become a world of data science. The data science that's now required, the big data is caused us to have to rethink how we engineer these products, because when you engineer at cloud scale, you also have to take advantage of cloud scale. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
You made me think as you were saying that one of the innovations that a lot of people don't really understand is when we talk about our data lake, right, which is really kind of ground zero for a lot of the analysis we're doing. That data lake is actually not a SIM in the sky. But it is technically a set of big data engines, Hadoop and Elastic clusters that actually index data that's stored there. It's very, very intense on the data science side, and it lends itself actually to this whole ML-powered firewall. Just the data science around being 95% effective, because that makes you think, well, what about the other 5%? Well, 5% is an interesting number on the whole ML-powered concept, because what we found, the data science around this, was that at about 3 months on average, we lose our efficaciousness at a 5% interval. And we could not do this without this sort of big data science. So we've now engineered things in our cloud around that. So when we push down new models to our firewalls, we actually forced the model refresh when we hit a 0.025% false positive, because false positives are always possible.
Oh, yeah.
But it's that kind of data science that's enabling us to do things that were just dreams before, and maybe not even dreams. It just wasn't things that people had thought of. But you start seeing the possibilities when you start analyzing the data, and you realize that there's insights to be had. And especially when you look at across our platform, realize that all of these insights are 1 + 1 = 3 type environment.
Yeah, no, and that whole, reduction, a very small number of false positives is tremendous. Especially think about it, like I talked about earlier, the office building. As you start looking at certain things that are coming into the network and being able to detect them parallel, it's easily, an easy task then to really reduce the false positives. And that's what Palo Alto has been doing for years, which has been great. So, hey, Jim, it's coming up on our time. Again, thanks very much. I appreciate it coming on and talking with us today and just sharing about Palo Alto, because like I said, it's something that we really had to, make sure users understand. Palo Alto is not just the next generation firewall company anymore. They are the cybersecurity company. So appreciate your time and thank you for joining us. And again, if there's any information anybody out there wants to learn about Palo Alto Network, please go ahead and just reach out to us at Sinnott Wolach Technology Group. We'll make sure that we contact you, set up a presentation demo, get you the information you're looking for. Again, Jim, thanks very much.
Sorry about that. And I'd like to add to that, if anyone has any PanOS 2.0 problems, Jeff, I believe that you're available to do some support, are you not?
Absolutely, absolutely. I actually have the data sheet on it. So
the whole page, the one page.
The whole page.
I love it. All right, cheers. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Check out our YouTube channel for previous Let's Talk Security broadcasts. Just go to youtube.com and search for Sinnott Wolach Technology Group. This episode is sponsored by Palo Alto Networks, your cybersecurity partner for today and tomorrow, and produced by Events by Drew Productions. Let's Talk Security is brought to you by Sinnott Wolach Technology Group, a leading provider of next-generation network and information security solutions and services.